I'm Benedict Wright, and thank you for listening to Millstone, a podcast production of the Galen Historical Society. We'd like to give special thanks to all those who agreed to be interviewed as part of this project, and all those who contributed their time or money to make this project possible. I'd also like to put some names to the voices that appeared throughout our series about the mills and farms of Clyde. In order of appearance, these voices were those of Kate Gibbs.
No, it was, very small town. I think when I was growing up, maybe 2,500 people, but it's not that big now. No, not even a traffic light. And everybody knew everybody in the neighborhood. There were lots of kids. The family that lived across the street, the Burkes, they had 6 kids. We had 7, so that made 13 for just those 2 houses. But, life was simple. We used to play like kick the can, and we used to play Red Rover, let Michael come over, and hopscotch, and just simple things. We didn't have any electronic toys, nothing like that, and lots of hand-me-downs. I remember getting a new Easter dress every Easter, but besides that, I used to get hand-me-downs, and it was fine. I was the middle of 7. Mm-hmm. And there's 4 girls and 3 boys in our family. Yeah.
Dick Ketchum.
We always used to flip quarters on Saturday mornings when the guys would go home, and whoever was the odd man out would win the quarters. So, and usually it was like Lee Osborne and Chet Burley, and then I can't think of it, and Chet Lee, and then Lee's brother. Raymond Osborne worked for George for a while too, but usually there was 3 or 4 people there. And then if I was there on that Saturday morning, I'd flip a quarter also, just for the sake of adding 1 more quarter to the mix. But that was something they got into a habit of doing all the time.
Jim Ketchum.
And if I had to look back on one thing in my life that meant everything, it was growing up in that community. You knew everybody. Everybody rushed in if there was any kind of a household problem. You just can't believe it. And then on top of it, with the paper route, you got to know in more detail and much better sense as many as 50 to 60 families at a time and over a period of time. So I couldn't say enough about that period of my life.
Keith Malchoff.
It was interesting that you were kind of equating the large number of farms with the large number of taverns. But
yeah, that's the way it was. There was the hired men seemed to go to there and get lit up at night and whatever. But then the farmers would all come into town on Saturday nights. We didn't especially, and of course you parked diagonal in Clyde, mm-hmm. And some local people would park their car down there in the afternoon on Saturday. So then you sit there and people are coming all crowded, and people coming along and toot your horn so-and-so, and then they come over and visit. That was Saturday night in Clyde, and all blocks were filled.
Yeah.
Wayne Rice.
I started growing chickens probably about 1952. And what I did is I bought my chicks from George here, and they were straight run. And then back then they had a process they called cap-on. You had a little pill in the rooster. On the back of the neck, you'd pick it up, and you had a little injector, and you put the pill underneath the skin and then inject it in there, and the skin would heal up. And that would cause the chicken not to have the male testosterone, and he would grow more like a female and get heavier. Oh. And then you could grow, you could probably save yourself a month on the weight because it would get heavier faster.
And that's because we're looking at the chicken for meat.
Oh, yeah, yep. And what I used to do is I'd take after I caponized them like that, and when they got ready, I used to go around the town, and back in the 50s there was an extremely lot of Italian families, and I used to go around like Friday night or something, and I had, like 10 or 15 families I'd go to and knock on the door and say, hey, Saturday I'm going to butcher some chickens. Can I sell you a chicken? And what I would do is I'd butcher them in the backyard, clean them all out, and then put them in a plastic bag and sell them and take them around, deliver them on Saturday to the, and it was pretty much Italians because they wanted a chicken that weighed, 5 pounds. They wanted a nice heavy chicken with some fat on it so they get some flavor out of it.
George Barnes.
Well, when I started working, it was GLF and Lyons.
Yes, I wanted to ask you about that later on.
And Bill Smart was probably about the same age as George.
Okay,
in that vicinity.
Yeah.
I started there in 1960 when I got out of 2 years of college. I took a grist of feed out for my father. He said, run this out to Smarts and get it ground up. So I did. And I just got out of college for 2 years, and I couldn't have to find a job. The farm wasn't big enough for both of us. And so when I got there, Bill Smart, the owner's brother, also worked there, Tom Smart.
Okay.
And he said, what are you doing now? I said, well, nothing right now. I'm just bringing this out. I just got out of college. And he says, go see my brother. We need somebody. And I did, and I started right away. And I would have never dreamed I would have stayed there. I was there until, that was 60. In 1980, Bill sold it to me in 1980.
Janet Hughes.
So you were a phys ed teacher?
Health and physical education.
Okay.
I taught a half year in Red Creek after I graduated, and then I had Leslie in the spring, so I only taught 6 months. And then I wasn't going to teach again because Jim, we had a baby, we're on the farm, need a wife. But my neighbor, Noreen Fichette, came over and she says, I'm pregnant, I'm going to have a baby soon, you got to go to North Rose. And then I went to taught the next year in North Rose.
And then you met my mother.
And met your mother was there.
My
Yeah.
mother was she was a school nurse there.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I ended up teaching a year and a half, and then after that I was on the farm. I had 4-H club for 10, 15 years. 4-H leader with Homer Swanson.
Oh.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I had plenty to do with farming. I loved it. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, good.
And her son, Jimmy Hughes.
And actually, this combine, even though it's 10 years old, it auto steers. Once you turn around and get back into the corn rows, you push a button and it drives itself.
So there's a GPS in there that knows where the straight line is.
There's the GPS on the front of the yellow thing.
Okay.
And I take it off of there, I put it on there, and it's got its own computer. And it'll show you the yield as you go across the field. And if I had a fertilizer spreader, I could vary my rate across the field. So even though it's 10 years old, it's got GPS, and I put the name of the field in the computer, and it records what it makes and stuff.
I want to take you to
Hugh Miner.
Yeah, I guess I've always been encouraged, and it makes it easier to encourage others, which makes teaching fun because you have that chance to encourage others. People say that teaching is harder than it used to be, and for one reason or another, and I don't want to get into that because I haven't been a current teacher. But so many of my relationships are based on students I taught, and I enjoyed all of them. I think maybe all. Never mind. No, really. But now and then, of course, I have to say, hi, Mr. Miner. Hi. I'm sorry, I forgot your name. It's embarrassing, but still, the fact that people still address me is fun, and all that time you invested in other people's lives was truly valuable.
Will Martin.
This is where when we moved from George Barnes's mill there in town, we started here, kind of put a couple bins together and moved a bunch of equipment over here and started bagging feed, and then we, you always add this or that along the way.
So are these bins here from the George Barnes era?
Actually, we build those bins. There's the cleaner that he had out there and the cracker I got above them, and actually what it's doing is when we're bringing in grains, whole grains in this end, and then those bins are the processed, it's ground, cracked, cleaned, whatever. And then, they're bringing parts over and weighing ingredients out of there. Here's where we're, that cartload of feed that Mark would have had out there, our non-GMO feed, would get bagged here. It gets sewed through the sewing machine, and then this guy here flattens it out, and they're stacking them off the other end there.
Okay. Dan Ketchum.
I do remember putting feed bags on this, because these have these spikes. So you put the burlap bag around this metal carrier. You put the spike in to hold the bag while it's filling, and as soon as it got pretty full, you'd put this in, and this would let you raise this up to let the feed out into the bag. Then you could shut that, pick this up, pull the bag out. We had, I don't know where they were. There were these maybe 12-inch pieces of twine that we would wrap around the top. We'd bunch the top of the burlap bag, wrap it around, and there was a special knot that we had to do to tie it, that the farmer could just
quickly undo.
Yeah, we want to undo it.
Gotcha.
So this was kind of a constant operation to bring the stuff out. And my guess is that if molasses had to go in, we used that one, because I remember using that one too. And this, I guess you couldn't stop so easily. So this when the feed was coming out here, you'd be working on one bag, and then while you were working on that one, you'd flip this over and it would go to the other bag. So this should go back. It seems to be caught right now. But it would go to one and then the other. But you had to be fast to keep everything going.
Sure, I could see that.
Yeah. Sometimes we wouldn't have time to tie it, so we would just put the bags there and tie them later.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Rose Jean Strakal.
So we bought this house in Jessica was born. Jessica was born in 76. I think we bought this house in 77 or 78. It was great. George used to come. In fact, see that pine tree right there out that window, the one on my yard? George gave us it, and we planted it together. And he gave me another one we put in the backyard, but since then, it's turned into a birdhouse. I'll show it to you. My son built a big birdhouse. We cut it down because it was dying and put this big birdhouse on top of it. I didn't want to get rid of it.
What was it like to be neighbors with
George? Oh, it was great. I always got along good with them. George loved to work in the garden too, and I did too. He was a gardener, and so, he brought those two trees over. But they were good neighbors. I always liked living near them. I used to call him Dad when we were growing up. Kate and I.
Sweet.
Mary was strict.
That's what Kate told me too, yeah.
She was very strict. She had a routine. In fact, when we moved in this house, and as the kids got older, Jason was like a guitarist and like in a band and all that, the garage kind of band with the neighborhood kids.
Did he play electric stuff?
Both, electric and acoustical. He's very good. I'd love to have you meet Jason. Well, anyhow, Mary would... He'd be banging away during the summer when they had stupid guitar. And, of course, they liked the heavy metal devil music, which I never liked. But it was the era. And so she'd call up every now and then, "Now, Rose Jean, would you mind if Jason just doesn't play the guitar between the hours of 1 and 2? She takes a nap every day during that." I said, "Okay, Mary, of course." And so he stopped. He stopped during those.
That was a good compromise. He knew not to push it. That's funny. And finally, Sandra Tracy Walsh. Well, Tracy, what was it like growing up in downtown Clyde?
Oh, it was wonderful.
There you go.
Oh, my God. I mean, back then, the apartments were really nice, and a lot of nice people lived downtown, unlike, somewhere along the line it just fell apart. And then it became kind of, nobody wanted to live downtown. It wasn't the place to live.
They wouldn't let them either.
The late 40s, early 50s,
Stop everybody.
the park was my playground.
Yep.
And the people that lived in the apartments around me were all great, really nice people. And I often tell Rose, I read every children's book in the library, which was over the market basket.
which was one of the 6 stores, right?
Yeah, that was the biggest one. The Market Basket was big, and right on top of it was the library.
Once again, thank you to everyone who participated in this project, including those whose conversations went unrecorded. I'd like to especially thank first Hugh Miner for all the hours he dedicated to make this project happen, next Amy Bruskern for the money that allowed me to purchase audio equipment, and finally Dan Ketchum for putting me up and putting up with me at his home in Clyde while I researched and recorded interviews. My name is Benedict Wright, and I recorded the interviews, wrote the script, performed and recorded the music, and edited the audio. Thank you to the Village of Clyde and the Galen Historical Society for welcoming me and supporting me through this project. It has been a privilege and a pleasure.